Hey, how's it going? I don't know if you can hear me right now. I probably have to speak a little louder. But, I mean, factorizing different types of aspects of point like locations and the position of the planet, where we are around the celestial center, and where we're heading, around an arc, a sector. Um, Obviously, where we're heading would just be around the same distance and gap between where we are and or where the planets previously rotated from in different seasons. Although the coordinates will always be different, we have all of the planets around us. Their point like positions are always statical. Obviously, we see the electrostatic around their gravity. Their gravity is central, and they do have a big um, carrying of different types of specific like frequencies corresponding to the light that they make. We can specifically see them as we get near them. Okay, so I'm not really trying to sound ridiculous or anything. Um, I guess I should just carry on to the introduction to why I am making this video. I know I may look a little ridiculous right now. Um, I just woke up. I'm a little tired, and I don't know. Probably better if I wasn't so tired. Um, but basically, um, over over statical curvature distances, the ground's always going through different types of electronic currents. The currents are visible from the atmosphere. Um, as you can see, the wind the wind phases and or the geometry that the wind layers of the planet makes a different type of charge or charge current is carrying most of the charged particles into our atmosphere. So as you can see, the atmosphere is already statically distributed itself in our static electric. The static electric, because it makes these different types of waves and these wave-like behaviors as it makes these different types of geometrical shapes of either spiral-like or wave-like, going around the whole sphere. While we see Earth, the sphere here, and we see the waves around the sphere, which would be the statical distributions of the charge of the day or the charge of the hour. It's basically a statical atomic time corresponding to where we are in the location of the position of the sun. Since we would either get different types of heat waves, which would be a magnitude that would make different types of bending effects to these specific points, different types of warp holes, or other atomic times where it's not really a big giant magnitude, but it would just be a spontaneous charge, or a spontaneous vacuum, or a spontaneous something that would affect the bending effect of the waves of the planet in a meteorological case, and it would make a different charge like interaction either on the ground or like something distributed in between the center and the position of the planet and its atomic time location, which sector of the planet is facing the sun and which sector isn't facing the sun. Usually the sectors or the different point like planets that have different types of superpositions, like the center, which would be the other variations of hydrogen. Their superposition would obviously indicate different types of spin-like interactions, since they do make conduct different types of particles in or exotic masses or phase masses as the sun ejects them. If we are obviously near these planets while those type of currents are interacting, it would make other distributions of transformations between point to point like interactions as we're nearby or in between. Obviously, knowing the distribution of space would be the gap of their positions and why they're so gapped because of their charge. So, in the case of coordinates, back to the ground, as we get back through the statical electrical atmosphere that we have, it makes it really hard to know our point-like positions as individual systems, since the superposition of the sun would obviously indicate that every point-like position on the ground is independent exponentially. Since all of the point-like positions are independent exponentially, the only bending effect that really takes place is special no no general relativity of the ground. General relativity of the ground would always be mass traveling in waves and or other aspects of motion. Special relativity would obviously indicate the independence or the individual indication of point-to-point like interactions, besides the statical cover-up of crystal classes, the gradients of classes, the group-like interactions that they have, because it's a global interaction of just different types of statical distributions of charges. Since all of these point-like interactions of the same species class would have charges, it would obviously carry a point-like charge of make mathematical indications of motion, since motion is obviously the case of the forward's axis as we get through the statical atmosphere chamber. Obviously, it will just continuously statically collect space, right? As we travel around the center. So I'm just going to keep making this statical example here. So, Earth. Now we have all of these point-like positions as they, network or interact and bend different types of energy. Now, individually myself, it's a little bit more complex for me into the statical atmosphere. As we make different types of connections out, with these bigger mass systems, right? Hard to stay focused on outside, but everything under the clouds kind of distorts everything inside, right? So, let's see. I grew up in like the 1990s. I was born in the 90s. I've always had a computer, and it's kind of complex to go for these other distributions of point like atomic times and previous wave-like interactions of atomic times that made these different mappings and locations of arriving to the planet. Growing differently without technology kind of made it more complex for the bending effect that they have on people who don't really know anybody on the ground. Individually, I know nobody. I haven't known anybody for a few years now, because of wave-like interactions of different types of animal behavior that makes different types of interferences to making these different types of interactions to the ground, because of the groups and the waves that carry on these different types of distortions and or division-like interactions that would cause different types of factors that would indicate disruptions and stuff like that. Really hard to travel with the full mass bending effect with special and or general relativity to make a whole system work, because of the math that the subtraction of mass, I guess, which really doesn't really make any sense. I mean, it does, but it's just other variables of introductions that I really want to talk about. Okay, so basically to me, I don't really have any back tracing, because when I arrived, I was always around technology, and technology was the only central of using this different networking system besides the statical systems on the ground, of making these different types of connections, I guess. I guess whenever you don't really know anybody, it's nuclear weak, really, corresponding to the static electric atmosphere. We have to figure out a way to get around the nuclear weak concept of not having any nuclear strength on the ground, because whenever you have nuclear strength, it's the accumulation of numeral binomial interactions where it's 1, 0, 1, 1, and you get a closer connection to the ground, because the different groups or the statical point-like behavioral particles or particle clusters that network in these different ways to make bending effects of energy. Usually when you don't know anybody, there's no bending effect of energy. You don't accumulate any type of factorizations of the ground or any statical distributions of where any point-like locations are, or any radiative interest or radiative densities to make these different types of fractions of rationality or rationals to make these different types of rational decisions, I guess, whenever you know different distributions of the ground. Obviously, the ground carries charges. Every point like individual variable or system would be a point like charge, since our heart rate carries our energy on the ground. Since the energy can only be diffracted by our brain, it's the most complex and the position of the forward's axis because of everything that's in between the ground and the groups of waves that don't really know anything about these different systems. Well, probably shouldn't talk too much, but anyways, the nuclear weak interactions would obviously indicate not really, having any type of bending effect towards the people who have bending effects towards these groups and waves, which makes it really complex to be here, I guess. Sorry if I'm not clear. I guess my description was lack of trying to be descriptive, because I talk so much about space, and I'm not really trying to talk much about ground if I talked about space. I can talk about space for a really long time, but really, it's not really that. It's too much. It would take too much time, I guess. And I just wanted to get to a point, I guess, of something to get around to. I apologize if it didn't make sense, but I should probably start talking about something else, I guess, another day. I'm sorry.